And it looks like we just had a problem right there. So, boy. Let me go pull up Google My Maps real quick and put that up on screen. Sorry about that, everyone. Looks like we're just having loads of problems tonight with the internet and now the maps. So let me pop that up. So let's get that over here. Pop that up, and now y'all see that. So we've once again had another internet outage. Apparently, our internet service provider is having a lot of problems today. It's not DDoS attacks for the first time. Now it's internet outages. After we fixed the whole DDoS thing, we blue screened the stream with a game, and now we're getting internet outages. But welcome back, everyone. So we're going to just continue on the stream, answer everyone's questions that we have. And once we answer those questions, we're probably going to answer 3 questions from the live chat and then round out the stream for the night. And so with that, did we answer the last question we were on, Matthew?
So we actually did not, and we actually had one more come in. So I'm going to jump back real quick and read that first one, which we had a $30 super chat from John Boyer, who said, do you think more Iron Dome defense systems are in the works from many countries? Onward, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, thanks for your great work. Slava President Zelensky, he is always spot on. Slava to all Ukrainians.
And I thank you so much for the support. And to answer that question, could you reread it real quick to me, Matthew, to make sure I get the first part of it right? Just the first part.
Yes. John says, do you think more Iron Dome defense systems are in the works from many countries?
I think for many countries, I don't really know. I think Israel is pretty much the sole proprietor and the owner of the only Iron Dome system in the world. We'll pull that up here in a second. So I don't think it's in the work for other countries, but it may be in the works for Ukraine. We have heard Israel talk about that a little bit, but we never got any follow-up on it either. So let's see if that is true. Iron Dome. And the current operators are the Israel Defense Forces. So the answer to that is apparently it's not in the works for other countries. We haven't heard about that. It may just be for Ukraine alone, and we don't even know about that as a certainty either. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Tito McLovin, who says, if Musk bought the Carl Zeiss Corporation and ASML, the USA would no longer need TSMC and could potentially be dominant for the next 1,000 years due to the US and Tesla creating 3 nanometer and even 2 nanometer chips.
I don't know about the next 1,000 years. Usually things evolve a little quickly, so there's always a little bit of competition, but I could agree. I don't really know a lot about the technology sphere, so I could agree by and large that sounds, on the surface, to be a pretty reasonable assumption, but I don't really know a lot about the technology sphere enough to know what kind of company mergers or buyouts would result in certain outcomes. But with that, I thank you very much for the support. I'm, of course, going to have to kind of declare ignorance on that one, because while I do like to think I know a lot. I don't know enough to actually answer that one competently. And so I hope that I did kind of answer that question a little bit. And I thank you once again for the support. And I'm sorry I couldn't answer it too well because I don't really know a lot about that sector. But with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $7 super chat from Mark, who says, Enforcer, Iraq had SA-8 Gecko and SA-2, famous for shooting down the U-2 and SA-18 Gophers, all of which only the SA-18 claimed 2 A-10 kills. While more probably down, I'd look at sortie versus killed.
That's a pretty good point. And that's pretty true. By and large, the coalition suffered very little air losses per sortie. That's true. But one thing that I always do keep an account is that for the aircraft that were lost, the A-10 made up a decent portion of those. And so that's what I'm kind of looking at. Because if you look at the sorties for the F-15s, the F-15 has never been shot down. And so it has a very good sortie to death rate, well, sortie to loss rate as compared to the A-10. If you see what I'm saying there. And so while it's an incredibly small percentage, especially compared to Soviet-made aircraft, for Western aircraft, it's still fairly high. And so I hope that it does kind of address the comment. And also, while that is true that, you know, out of all those anti-air systems, I don't know about each of them exactly. You sound more like an expert in that arena than I in terms of surface-to-air missile batteries. But if you were to take a SA-8 or anything like that, the Russians aren't even using those anymore as far as we know. They're using almost entirely S-300s and S-400s like they have been using in Syria and conflicts from then forward. And so with that, times have changed. So, you know, they're not, you know, Western aircraft like the A-10 wouldn't be facing down S-18s or SA-5s or anything like that. They would be facing down S-300s and S-400s. So with that, I hope that does answer the question because times have changed, and so the difficulty of actually using an A-10 may be even harder now. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question. I hope that's kind of addressed that comment fairly well, but it is still true that the sortie rate per loss on an A-10 is still pretty low. But with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and it is now time to recognize a few super chats that were left without comments. So up first, we have a $5 super chat from Natoya85. Then we have a $5 super chat from Michael Donahue. Then we have a few more from Sweetleaf and Sierra Star. And then we have a $3 super chat from Mark Andre Burnett. And then finally, we have a $2 super chat from Ukraine F. Putin and a $1 super chat from Zach Jeffers, one of our Discord mods. So thank you very much to all of you for your support of the channel. And with that being said, as the old saying goes, we are on to the next super chat, which is from Detroit Micro Sound, who puts in a $5 donation and says Lockheed Martin's website still says the ERGM-LRS will be available soon, but Ukraine is using them in the HIMARS.
Could you reread that one again real quick?
He says Lockheed Martin's website still says the ERGM-LRS will be available soon, but Ukraine is using them in the HIMARS.
Interesting. So apparently the website hasn't been updated or something like that. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I do have to say that while a lot of people do view me as an expert, I would like to make it clear I don't really get into technicals way too much, and so sadly I don't know the exact missile you are talking about, the designation of it, or anything like that. But I will take your word for it, and that is an interesting little conundrum there, if true, that they're saying that it'll be available soon, but it's already being used. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and thank you for sharing that little tidbit of information with us. I didn't know about that. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Christopher Cartman Olson, who says, Thanks, bud.
And thank you, Bud, for watching the stream and enjoying it. Of course, we've had to go through a decent amount of them tonight, and it looks like a lot of people decided that the last one would be their final one. We only have 400 people in the room right now, and so we're getting on down to the level of normal Ukraine war streamers. But I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy it, because we do put in as much effort as possible to try and make these streams palatable and enjoyable to watch, although it is covering a pretty serious topic, which is war. And so with that, thank you once again, and I hope that does address the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $5 super chat from Mike D, who says, hypothetical, Russia shoots cruise missile to Kiev. It malfunctions en route and hits a city in Poland. What is NATO's reaction?
I don't know where that cruise missile would be coming from if it landed in Poland heading to Kyiv, because the Russians have a pretty straight shot from Russian territory over Ukraine territory to Kyiv. Also, the same goes for the Black Sea. It would be a straight route over Ukrainian territory. But if a cruise missile was to fall within Poland, it would depend on what kind of let's see how to explain this. It would depend on what kind of an outcome would happen. If that cruise missile landed and it didn't kill anyone and it landed in the field and the Russians apologized heavily, said very sorry, that was not supposed to fall in y'all's territory, please forgive us, all that kind of stuff, it most likely wouldn't result in anything. But if for some reason it slammed into a city and killed dozens, even if they were to apologize, that would enrage the West so much that may invoke Article 5. The Polish may actually insist on it being invoked, and then that may lead into the war that everyone's kind of dreading a little bit. So with that in mind, I think, of course, it depends on the context of what it would hit. It may lead to war, but it may also not lead to war. You do have to remember that back in the 80s or the 70s, I forgot which decade it was, a MiG-23 from East Germany took off from an airfield. The pilot ejected from the plane on takeoff, and the jet continued to fly over East Germany into West Germany, and then crashed into a house in the Netherlands and killed a boy. But it didn't really lead to anything. It didn't lead to a war. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from William Mitchell, who says, as Captain Pierce once said, war is war, and hell is hell. And of the two, war is worse, because in hell, there are no innocent victims.
Could you reread that one again? Because I was looking at something in the chat that you addressed, and I was trying to figure out what was happening, but could you reread that real quick?
Yes, William said, as Captain Pierce once said, war is war, and hell is hell. And of the two, war is worse, because in hell, there are no innocent victims.
Who's Captain Pierce?
I'm not really sure.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. Sadly, I don't know who Captain Pierce is. I don't know a lot of individuals. Of course, pertaining to war, I usually focus on the larger picture. But I do think that quote is pretty decent. But well, it does stand true. But I thank you very much for the support and also the quote. And I would agree that war is worse because there are innocent people who get caught up in war. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment. And thank you for the pretty good quote right there. And with that, we're going to move on to the next quote. Oh, wait a minute. Now that everyone's saying MASH, now I know. I actually have seen that quote before, and I remember it now. It's just that of course, I don't browse through my whole entire TV database in my head to look for the specific quote from a show. But I do remember it now. It was a little clip I saw on YouTube. So with that, thank you once again for the support. Now we know where it came from. It came from MASH. And so I hope that does answer the question. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I'll have to admit, I've actually never watched MASH, so I would have probably never have gotten that. So good thing the people in the chat mentioned it. The enforcers watched it, but I haven't. So that's going to shock a lot of people, and we're about to have a hell of a lot of outrage in the chat, I'm sure, over that. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $5 donation from Keymaster, who does not leave a comment. And thank you very much, Keymaster, for the support. We appreciate you very much. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Sonia Blade, who says, thanks for keeping us, thanks for keeping up the great work, guys.
And thank you so much, Sonia, for the support. We try our best, and we have run 3 streams tonight, and hopefully this one will be our last one. We can just run it all the way until the end if we need to. Well, of course, we'll have to. And so thank you once again for the support and enjoying the work we try and put into this. And so with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Tito McLovin, who says, Enforcer, don't give the Russians too much credit. The Chinese are behind the DDoS hits. Microsoft has stopped ORC support on Windows operating systems 10-11 since 6/21.
Well, thank you very much for the support. That may be true, but then again, there's a lot of people who support the Russians here in the West that may be doing this to us. And when I say a large portion, I mean it's actually more of a minority. But still, they can still levy cyber attacks on their own. And so it may be the Chinese. We really don't know who they are. But there has been people levying cyber attacks against us. But tonight it has not been there. The reasons we have lost connection tonight has not been a DDoS attack once. Our internet actually went down. And I want to make sure that's a clarification because every time our stream goes down, it's not always a DDoS attack. And tonight's a good example of when our internet provider lets us down instead of a DDoS. So with that, I thank you very much for the support. And that may be true. It may be the Chinese. Who knows? But I hope that does address the comment. And I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And moving on, we just have two more super chats left until we get to our live chat questions. So stick around. Up next, we have a $2 super chat from Zach Jeffers, who says, Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukraini, Zach Jeffers, and I thank you so much for the support. It does mean a lot, and it does help us to keep running this channel, no matter what amount it is. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the final super chat of the night. Let me make sure this is the last one, and it is. Goes to Detroit Micro Sound, who puts in a $2 donation and says ESGMLRS equals Vladov Putler's extra long coffin nails.
Well, thank you very much for the support. I don't know the specific designation of the rocket you just called out there. I'm assuming it's one of the HIMARS rockets, but I do thank you very much for the support, and hopefully if you are talking about those HIMARS rockets, those will lead to the nails in Putin's coffin. A pretty artistic, a very creative way of talking about those rockets. Once again, I don't really get into technical terms too much, but hopefully I am getting right what you're saying. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question that I actually just saw from Hoodoo, Texas.
Yes, we do have one more super chat that just came in from Hoodoo, Texas, who puts in a $10 donation and says, what kind of musket are you using in your Revolutionary War reenactment? Is it the Brown Bess or the Charville?
That's a great question. That's a wonderful, extraordinary question, Hoodoo. There are a lot of guns that reenactors do use. Some people use Baker rifles. Some people use Honker rifles, Pennsylvania rifles, Brown Besses, Charlevilles. I would say, but that question is getting a little too specific because the event I was at was... I'm not going to say that, but if I give away that information, it may make it easier to pin out who I am. So I thank you very much for the support, Hoodoo. I'm not going to answer that question to try and keep my anonymity as best preserved as possible, because I'm just going to say there are videos out there of me at that reenactment, and if I give away, because my voice isn't heard in any of the videos, but if I give away what kind of gun I was using, that might also give away who I am in any of those videos. So I hope that does kind of address why I'm not going to answer that question, but it was one of those. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you once again for the support.
All right, and moving on to our live chat questions. Up first, we have one from James Reyes, who says, Enforcer, who was worse, Lenin or Stalin?
Stalin was particularly worse. Both of them were pretty bad, but Stalin was worse. Stalin, of course, when Lenin died, used his position as Secretary General, or General Secretary, that's the actual name. He used that position to, of course, levy himself into a position of power as the premier of the Soviet Union, and then he used that position to commit purges against pretty much everyone who was alive during the time of the Russian Civil War. He then constructed the Holodomor, which was a pretty much state-ran famine in Ukraine that killed off millions. He also started to try and collectivize farming in the countryside, which led to massive famines around the entirety of the country, not just Ukraine, but the rest of the Soviet Union, because a lot of the peasants killed off their cattle and destroyed their crops in an attempt to make sure that the government wouldn't seize control of it without them getting any kind of advantage out of it. And so in those regards, I would say that pre-World War II, he was pretty bad. Then World War II came into the picture, and of course, in World War II, they killed a whole bunch of Poles in the Katyn massacre. They also did a whole bunch of other very questionable things, like the Red Army raping pretty much every single woman they ran into contact with during the war, whether they be Russian, German, Polish, from the Baltic states, Ukrainian, Romanian, anyone, they would rape them. There's a lot of stories about that, and it's pretty well documented at this point that the Soviet army was pretty much a raping machine that moved across the European continent through the later end of World War II, raping literally every single woman in their path, sometimes even raping babies, which is the sickest thing I've ever heard. And the Russians really haven't changed in that regard. But after the war, of course, things didn't get any better. Stalin continued to instill purges, killing off high government officials, and also sending millions to their deaths in the gulags. And so, while Lenin, of course, has a lot of bad strikes against him, he's not as bad as Stalin. Stalin's on a whole other level, in my opinion. And so, with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I think Stalin's worse. So, with that, thank you once again for the great question. And we're going to answer 2 more, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Andy, who says, Enforcer, is it possible that oligarchs are behind the fires to cover up their past embezzlement of military contract money?
I don't think so. A lot of the oligarchs have moved on. And also, one thing I was pointing out when I was talking to some of my viewers who were at this event I'm talking about, the fires that we see on the skyscrapers in Moscow are usually on air conditioning units on the roof. And so, usually, fires that are started by sabotage start at the bottom of the building because then the fire moves up through the floors and then burns everything out. So, in those regards, those will most likely be what the oligarchs are targeting, and those fires actually look like mechanical failures instead of sabotage for the most part. Moving on to the chemical factories themselves, destroying their production abilities does not destroy paper trails or information trails that would lead to them being incriminated in some kind of an embezzlement operation. So my answer to that would largely be no. I don't think it's being caused by the oligarchs for that reason. It may just be sabotage or incompetence. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we are moving on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person who threw in a question?
So the last question of the night goes to Ujar Gamer, who says, Enforcer, what do you think could be a deciding factor for NATO and its allies to get involved? I'm thinking maybe if the capital falls, or do you think other key cities if they fall?
Can you reread that one again?
They said, Enforcer, what do you think could be a deciding factor for NATO and its allies to get involved? I am thinking maybe if the capital falls, or do you think other key cities if they fall?
I don't think anything is really going to draw NATO into this war, regardless of the significance of the city. Kyiv will not fall anytime soon because there's not even a front line around there anymore. Neither will Kharkiv because the front line is, of course, in shambles there. So there's not really any major strategic cities that the Russians could capture that would lead the U.S. to be drawn into the war. And on top of that, if Ukraine loses, the West is probably going to act like they didn't even lose any skin in this game. So by and large, I don't think any city being lost would draw the West into this war. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. I know I said that I was only going to answer that one last question. We were going to end the stream, but I did see something pretty interesting, kind of a little funny to me, because it doesn't even. I don't even really think this one was based in too much fact or context. But I saw a viewer say that under Stalin, the Russians finally had their first industrial revolution, and God knows how many people died during ours. Well, I can tell you this for certain. We didn't kill off millions of people in famines in the United States, and we also didn't send them to prison labor camps to work to death. American slavery, while always looked at as a negative thing, was actually an enigma, because it was the only area where slavery in North America actually resulted in a positive rate of growth, population growth, instead of a negative one. If you look at the Caribbean, for example, slaves had to constantly be imported into the Caribbean because they would never have enough kids fast enough to replace their own numbers. They would die off due to the terrible conditions and also the poor treatment there. But on the other hand, in the South, that wasn't the case. The climate was a little bit more hospitable, although the southern climate is incredibly harsh. And so even if you were to talk about the slaves, they still had a positive birth rate. And so there was more slaves being born than dying. And so even in that regard, which isn't really the Industrial Revolution, no one was dying. And, you know, on top of that, in the North, you didn't have the U.S. government going around and rounding up political dissenters and throwing them into work camps to work to death. You also didn't have millions of people just being killed in government purges. So I don't really think that one's based in historical context. And also on top of that, we had massive labor movements during the mid to late 1800s, like the Haymarket riots that started to instill labor laws in the United States. And you would see Theodore Roosevelt come around and kind of bring that into full swing and full fruition, where workers really weren't abused to the point of death. On top of that, that's not really good for the employers in the United States, because if you kill someone by working them to death, you kind of lose that labor. So once again, I don't really know the context behind that one, because nothing in the United States ever killed off so many people that it left a generational gap like you see in Russia because of what happened during Stalin's reign. So kind of hope that addresses that one historically, because I read that one, that distracted me so much I had to have Matthew reread a question, because that one was just so off kilter and not even historically accurate. It's like looking through a fake lens of history. So with that, I hope that does address the question. We also got $2 Australian super chats from Fuzz the Cat that says Fuzz the, and I think there's going to be another one that says Cat, and we'll wait for that one. And there it is. And so he said Fuzz the Cat over 3 of them. And so I thank you so much for the support. And I hope that does address all of the questions for the night. Once again, I hope you all have enjoyed the stream. It seems like more and more people are coming into this one, but sadly, it is coming to a close. If you did enjoy all 3 streams, which tried to cover the news and the question segments, please make sure to subscribe. We do run these streams every single night. And of course, we upload summaries as well every single night, except for Mondays. Mondays, we take off in everything, both the streams and the summaries. And so once again, hope you all did enjoy. Thank you very much once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow for day 134 and the beginning of week 19 of the news. Thank you all once again, and I'll see you tomorrow.